Welcome. What we're going to be looking at over the next few minutes is a presentation on collaboration in research. What this is, in essence, is a whirlwind tour of a presentation that's going to take about an hour, done in about 5 minutes. Let's see how we get on. Okay, let's begin. Over there is my background, as you can see, been varied. We've had some successes in academia, and we've just run a large project called Emotion Regulation of Others and Self, which we're talking about over the next few slides. This is the Emotion Regulation of Others and Self project. As you can see, there's a number of different researchers from 5 different universities. It's funded by the Economic and Social Research Council. Let's see how it worked. Okay, let's look what EROS achieved, and as you can see from that great big list over there, a great deal, lots of books, conference papers, journal articles, influential advice, and lots of impact in terms of the media. Okay, there's not a huge number of people, but it's working together, and in what we're looking at today is collaboration, so let's see how they collaborated and organised themselves to be so successful. So we have a broad common area that we're looking at, and we have a couple of objectives in terms of what we're going to be looking at. But then when you see the nature of the collaboration, you see this nice blue diagram with all these different nodes popping out, and you've got different areas. You're going from clinical, you've got work, you've got neuroscience, health, developmental, social, and sport. It's very, very different areas of application, looking at a common area, and that's the key thing, because they're going to now collaborate to try and get some work done. So how they organised themselves was to split the research up into 6 key questions, in essence. And one of the questions related to the development and variation, and as we can see, there were 5 studies involved in that, and different researchers were involved in planning and conducting those research, whereas in the intervention study, there are only 4 studies, and again that was split across the different areas of collaboration. So it just gives a way of mapping out the nature of the collaboration, how it's going to integrate together around a common area. So let's look at a way of developing some sort of collaborative research project mirroring the type of structure that was done in the EROS project. I've picked a title called Getting People Healthier and Happier. I picked this because it can be broad and include different areas of application, so the work issues, home issues, leisure issues, therefore including tourism. It starts from a point, and probably biased from my area of interest, is that the point that exercise is medicine, building on all the Olympic legacy work, and that raising activity levels is important, and there's a link between feeling healthier and feeling happier. But it also opens up the possibility of examining the issues from a variety of different perspectives, including psychological, physiological, and sociological. But of course, these are not restricted; that they could also include, say, economic perspective, for example. So I looked at the title and pitched that around 4 questions. Question number 1 might be psychologists and how do people get themselves happier and healthier. Of course, there would be sports psychologists interested in that, leisure-based psychologists, all different. How that's then broken down into one of the studies, and I've suggested 3 studies, is really open to interpretation. It's more about the creativity of the researcher rather than any programmed way of doing things that's going to be correct. And we can pursue that across all the 4 different questions. If we look at how do people make the best use of their leisure time, again, psychologists look at motivation, and the idea of getting out and doing something is clearly in the area of motivation. That could be looked at from a sociological point of view. It's clearly in leisure, so that as anyone interested in leisure is likely to have some interest in that research question. What is the physical basis of happiness, for example? Well, we could definitely bring in people with a leisure interest into that, certainly a tourism interest in that. The idea that people book their holidays with the expectation that they're going to enjoy their holidays seems a sort of fundamental principle that hasn't been examined that much. Of what the extent to which that has any underlying physical any physical substrates might be influencing that is important. And we can take that into, from a different perspective. We can look at why are some groups happier than others, and more importantly, why are some groups unhappier than others, and we can delve into sort of subcultural issues. The sociologists typically pursue this line of research, but social good psychologists, and clearly once the focus of the research is within your subject area, then it opens up, such as leisure and tourism, it opens up interest for a whole range of researchers there also. So how do I approach working in teams? First job is always to identify and appoint the project leader. That person is ultimately the one who takes charge of all the key decisions. It doesn't have to be the most experienced, it's often the most enthusiastic, but you need a project leader. Can't have two leaders saying different things, driving a project in two different directions. Sometimes, even if you're the most experienced person, you need to accept that the group and the project is going one way, and you have to abide by that decision. Second is to identify each person's role. It's really important that people know what they're going to be doing. If you're playing soccer, you can't have 10 centre forwards. No one would pass to them, they'd never score any goals for obvious reasons. Third key area is to identify timelines, what's got to be done and when. That is really important because it relates to the roles. One person passes the project to another and keeps the project moving. Projects that I run, I don't like them to stop, so I like to pass them around so that when anyone hits an obstacle, then they just pass the project to someone else and they carry on. So it's always moving forwards, and that's just about organisation. Next is to be aware of the processes in working in a group, and they often involve some degree of forming, as everyone gets together and learns about who each other is. Storming, once after the sort of honeymoon period of the group forms, there's areas of conflict that comes about as that people don't seem to be doing what they said they were going to be doing, and storming can come in all sorts of different ways. Third part is about norming. Everyone learns what everyone else can do and what the expectations of the group are all about, and start sort of adjusting their behaviour and thoughts accordingly. And once all those things are in place, you get performing. You don't necessarily have to have storming, but it's just to be conscious that in the early stages of a project, storming can occur, and that can be quite demotivating. It can be demotivating and therefore can threaten the project. I think an important part of any piece of research is to set a goal to enjoy it, and that sounds awfully an abstract-based concept, but it's just that as a reminder that you often do these things because you enjoy doing them, you've got an interest of the area, and not to lose sight of that. And then, in relation to your own working and in relation to others, is reflect on what worked well and why, and ask other people in the group to do the same, so that people can learn to improve their own research skills. So when the next project comes along and you say what things do you do well, people are pretty clear about what they do well and what they don't do so well. It might well be that they always put their hand up to do a certain thing and always get their and that's really successful. If you're working with those people repeatedly, and it might well be advisable to give them different experiences so that they get the rounded research profile, but that's to do with the motivation of the individual and your role in that individual and in that group. So that's pretty much how it works. So if we were designing a project, let's look where to start. First, you start with a question, and let's look at emotional states people experience when booking a holiday. And I should imagine we've all booked holidays, and we've all seen people in the travel agents booking holidays. And whilst a holiday should be associated with a really pleasurable experience, most people look absolutely terrified as they book their holiday. And I know maybe it's my inherent meanness that the idea of spending thousands of pounds is one that's not engaged in lightly. If you've got children, you will be spending that sort of money soon. So it's going to be booking a holiday is going to be the sort of thing that activates pretty intense emotions, because it's pretty important. We place importance on the happiness and the that we're going to experience, and we look forward to when we go on holiday. Often the idea of looking forward to the holiday is more enjoyable than the actual holiday itself. So let's break that down to what we could do. Is we first need to think about what theoretical contribution this will make into the area, and to do that we would need an expert in the subject area, expert in the applied area, to actually say, well, actually there aren't many studies that are doing this. The studies that have done this have missed this gap in the literature. So someone's going to make the theoretical contribution and identify the research gap. So the study is worth doing because theory hasn't been tested appropriately in this context. And if we found out that this was if we found out that there was an applied message that could be translated into practice, we could actually then start engaging with some sort of impact research into trying making the research have some usefulness. Next is the idea that can the study be done, and if we're going to be looking at, we've got to be thinking about the methods here. Have we got access to participants? How should we collect the data? I know in our discussions in the EROS project that we would have the researchers who are all about going in the real world and collecting participants as they make decisions in real life. And then there were the other sides of that who would like to have control studies where you've got a control group, an experimental group, and really isolate the study so that we can identify what the factors are associated with change, and therefore have some confidence in what the results are actually saying. And the pros and cons to both, but when they're put together, they often really complement each other very nicely. We then need to think about the skills required to publish the work, and someone's got to put some time into be writing it. There's got to be someone with expertise for the analysis of the data. There's got to be someone with expertise in the process of publication. We could argue that, yeah, we could learn this all as we go, but it's a massive job to do that, and it just then really becomes a heavy burden on any one individual to actually do all this themselves. So we'd identify people with real expertise in these areas because they accelerate the process. And I think it's really nice when you have an idea and you can set the idea up into a study, and it rapidly goes through the process from idea to publication, rather than it sort of become your life's work where you end up really not enjoying the process of opening up the computer and opening up the file for the second year running, third year running, and so on. I think we've all had projects which have gone on for years and years. So building a research team can accelerate that, so that it then becomes a reference on your CV, and you also, which I think is also really nice, start seeing it being cited by other researchers. And then final part, which is somewhat contentious sometimes, and it relates to your forming, storming, norming, performing aspect, is building up the authorship list and ensuring everyone's had a meaningful contribution. Everyone's pulled their weight, and it's the who goes where is done fairly, and everyone's happy with that. And that's a discussion, it's a frank discussion. It's always worth having early on in the process, so that everyone understands where they're going with regarding that. And in many cases, certainly in the research teams I've been with, that it's been very difficult to separate the middle authors and between who's done what, and that can almost be on a rotational basis, where because you can't separate who goes third and fourth when two people do relatively similar things, but you just don't want consistently one person put up higher than the other if the contribution doesn't really suggest that. Let's look at the take-home message. Is firstly identify a common area of interest or a shared outcome. Some people might just want the publication to be really prepared to work for that. For most people, it's about the area of research that they're really interested in and just prepared to get involved and get some decent outputs from something they really enjoy. It's a bit about organising the project, seeing it as a start and end, break it down into different tasks, get everyone to be really clear on what they're doing and when they're meant to be doing it. Related to that is have a project leader, and really important is to keep the project moving all the time so that it doesn't sort of stick in someone's inbox for 2 months and everyone wonders what's going on, because that's really demotivating for everyone. And it's really avoidable in most cases. Because it can be avoided by just passing the project to someone else and so that some other section can be done. And that's just thinking creatively about breaking the tasks down so that they can be done at different stages. And that's it. I've got lots more to say about lots of things, but I'm just not saying them right now. Thank you.